In a village where the mango trees grew so tall they seemed to scrape the belly of the sky, there lived a woman named Ades. She had 3 children, Pamela, the eldest and only daughter, and her 2 brothers, Chidi and Emeka. Their father, a man called Obiora, was known throughout the village as a prosperous trader, a man whose smile could charm the coins from your pocket and whose handshake sealed deals that made other men wealthy. But here is what the village did not know. Here is what Ades kept locked behind her teeth, like a secret she was forced to swallow every single day. Obiora was 2 men living in one body. The man the village saw wore fine clothes and spoke with honey on his tongue. He donated to the church. He bought drinks for the elders. He was the first to arrive at funerals and the last to leave weddings. But the man who existed behind the walls of that beautiful house, the man who emerged when the doors were locked and the curtains were drawn, that man was something else entirely. Ades learned this truth on her wedding night, when Obiora's hand found her face for the first time. She learned it again when she was pregnant with Pamela, and he kicked her so hard she thought she would lose the child. She learned it in the years that followed, in the cigarette burns hidden beneath her wrapper, in the bones that healed crooked because she was never allowed to see a doctor. But Ades was not a fool. She was a woman who understood that survival sometimes meant waiting, sometimes meant planning, sometimes meant loving your children so fiercely that you would swallow any poison to see them escape. And so she made a decision that would set everything into motion. She would send her children away. It began with Pamela. The girl was 16, bright as the morning star, with her mother's gentle eyes and a mind sharp enough to cut glass. Ades had been saving money for years, coins hidden in the hem of her wrapper's notes tucked into the false bottom of her wooden box. Small amounts skimmed from the housekeeping money Obiora threw at her like scraps to a dog. That is a scholarship, Ades told her daughter one night, when Obiora was away on one of his trading trips. A school in the city. They will take you, feed you, educate you. You will become something, my daughter. You will become someone he cannot touch. Pamela did not want to go. She had seen too much, understood too well what her absence would mean for her mother. But Ades held her daughter's face in her hands, those hands that had wiped away tears, that had cooked meals, that had taken beatings meant for her children, and she spoke words that Pamela would carry with her for the rest of her life. You cannot save me by staying. You can only save me by becoming strong enough to come back. And so Pamela left. 2 years later, Chidi followed. He was a quiet boy, the kind who noticed everything and said little. He had his father's height, but none of his cruelty. And Ades saw in him a gentleness that she knew Obiora would eventually try to beat out of him. A technical school in the south accepted him. He would learn engineering, would build things with his hands, would become a man who created rather than destroyed. Emeka was the last to go, the youngest, the dreamer, the one who believed that stories could change the world. He won a place at a university far to the north, where he would study literature and philosophy and all the things that Obiora called useless nonsense for lazy men. The day Emeka left, Ades stood at the doorway of their compound and watched her last child walk down the red dirt road until he was nothing but a speck against the horizon. And then she went inside, and she sat in the darkness of her room, and she allowed herself to cry for the first time in 18 years. She had done it. She had gotten them out. Now she just had to survive long enough for them to come back. 7 years passed. In the city, Pamela transformed. She finished secondary school at the top of her class, earned a place at the university, and graduated with honors in law. She became the kind of woman who walked into rooms and commanded attention, who spoke and made people listen, who carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had survived things she never spoke about. She got a job at a prestigious firm. She saved her money. She called her mother every Sunday from a phone booth near her office, and she counted the days until she could go home. Chidi built machines that hummed and purred and did exactly what he told them to do. He discovered that he had a gift for understanding how things worked, for seeing the connections between pieces that others missed. He started his own small business, repairing electronics, then expanded into installations, then contracts with bigger companies. He was not wealthy, but he was stable. He was building something, and every month, he sent money home to his mother through a secret account that Pamela had helped set up. Emeka wrote stories. He wrote about villages and families, about secrets and lies, about the darkness that lived inside ordinary people. His professor said he had a rare talent, the ability to find truth in fiction. He published small pieces in literary magazines, won a few awards, dreamed of one day writing a book that would make his mother proud. They all thought of home. They all thought of her. And they all carried the same fear in the pit of their stomachs. Fear that every phone call might be the last, that every silence might mean the worst. But Adaze was clever. She learned to speak in code, to hide her pain behind cheerful words, to convince her children that she was fine, that their father had mellowed with age, that things were better now. She lied to protect them, because she knew that if they came back too soon, before they were ready, Obiora would destroy them too. What she did not tell them was this: Obiora had gotten worse. Much, much worse. It was Pamela who decided it was time. She was 28 years old, established in her career, with money in the bank and connections that could move mountains. Chidi was 30, running a successful business with employees who respected him. Emeka was 26, about to publish his first collection of stories. They had become exactly what their mother had dreamed: strong, independent, capable. They had become people who could fight back. "We go together," Pamela told her brothers during a conference call that lasted 3 hours. "We go as a family. We assess the situation, and then we get her out." They agreed to return during the festival season, when the village would be full of visitors, and Obiora would be forced to maintain his public mask. They would have witnesses. They would have protection. They would have each other. The journey home felt like traveling back through time. The city fell away, replaced by smaller towns, Tembiajes, then finally the red dirt roads and mango trees of their childhood. Pamela drove the rented car, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. Chidi sat beside her, checking his phone obsessively for messages that never came. Emeka was in the back seat, silent, staring out the window at a landscape that was both familiar and strange. The compound looked different, smaller, somehow. The paint was peeling from the walls, and the garden that their mother had once tended with such care was overgrown with weeds. The windows were dark, despite it being an early evening, and there was a stillness about the place that made Pamela's skin crawl. "Something's wrong," Chidi said. They found her in the kitchen. Adaze was on her knees, scrubbing the floor with a brush that had worn down to almost nothing. She was thin, so thin that her bones showed through her skin like a map of suffering. Her hair, which had once been her pride, was patchy and gray. She was wearing a dress that Pamela recognized from 7 years ago, now faded and torn. But it was her eyes that broke them. Her eyes were empty, hollow. The eyes of someone who had stopped, living a long time ago, and was simply waiting for her body to catch up. "Mama," Pamela whispered. Adaze looked up. For a moment there was nothing, no recognition, no emotion, no life. And then, slowly, something flickered behind those dead eyes. A spark, a memory, a hope she had almost forgotten how to feel. "My children," she breathed. "You came back." She tried to stand, but her legs gave out beneath her. All three of them rushed forward, catching her, holding her, and Pamela felt her mother's bones through her clothes and wanted to scream. This was not the woman who had raised them. This was not the woman who had sacrificed everything to give them a chance at life. This was a ghost. This was what remained. After years of systematic destruction. "Where is he?" Chidi asked, his voice hard with rage. Adaze flinched. At the question, actually flinched, like a dog that had been beaten too many times. "He will be back soon. He went to the market. You should go. If he finds you here, we're not going anywhere," Pamela said. "We came to take you home." "This is my home." "No, Mama. This is your prison." They heard his card before they saw it. The crunch of tires on gravel, the slam of a door. Footsteps that Adaze had learned to recognize and fear over 3 decades of marriage. Obiora walked into his house and found his 3 children sitting in his living room, surrounding his wife like soldiers, protecting a wounded comrade. Ahid. His hair was white now, his face lined with the kind of wrinkles that came from a lifetime of frowning, but his eyes were the same cold, calculating, the eyes of a predator, assessing whether to attack or retreat. He chose to smile. "My children," he exclaimed, spreading his arms wide as if expecting them to run into his embrace. "What a surprise! Why did no one tell me you were coming?" "Perhaps because you don't answer our calls," Pamela said. Her voice was steady, but her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Perhaps because every time we ask to speak to Mama, you say she's busy or sleeping or unwell. Your mother is delicate. She needs rest. Our mother is starving. She needs freedom." The smile didn't waver, but something shifted behind Obira's eyes. Something dark. Something dangerous. "I see the city has taught you to be disrespectful. Perhaps you've forgotten how things work in this house." "We've forgotten nothing," Chidi said. "That's why we're here." Obiora's gaze swept across his children, his daughter, who had become a lawyer, his eldest son, who had become a businessman, his youngest son, who had become a writer. They had escaped him. They had grown beyond his reach, and now they had returned, and they were looking at him without fear. He did not like that. He did not like that at all. "Your mother is my wife," he said, and his voice had lost its false warmth. "She belongs to me. She goes where I say, she goes. She does what I say, she does. That is the order of things. That is how it has always been." "That order is over," Pamela said. "We're taking her with us." "Tonight?" Obiora laughed. It was a terrible sound, cold, mocking, utterly devoid of humor. "And how do you plan to do that?" "This is my house. She is my property. The law? I am the law," Pamela said. "Or at least, I know it better than you ever will. You have no legal right to hold her here against her will. She is not property. She is a human being, and she is leaving." For a long moment, no one moved. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on, and Adaise sat in the middle of it all, trembling, her eyes darting between her children and her husband like she could undecide which outcome she feared more. Then Obiora did something unexpected. He stepped aside. "Fine," he said. "Take her. See if I care. She's old and used up anyway. Worthless." Pamela didn't trust it. Neither did Chidi or Emeka. But Adaise was already struggling to her feet, her eyes wide with disbelief, and they couldn't waste this chance on suspicion. "Get your things, Mama," Pamela said. "Only what you need. We're leaving now." They were halfway to the door when Obiora spoke again. "You think you've won?" he said. His voice was quiet now, almost conversational. "You think you can just walk in here and take what's mine and face no consequences? But you don't know everything, my children. You don't know the secrets your mother has been keeping from you." Adaise froze. Her whole body went rigid, and Pamela saw something in her mother's eyes that she had never seen before. "Terror? What secrets?" Emeka asked. Obiora smiled. And this time it was the smile of a man holding a knife. "Ask her what happened to your grandmother. Ask her why the old woman died so suddenly, right after changing her will to leave everything to Ada. Ask her about the poison." The silence that followed was absolute. Pamela felt the words hit her like physical blows, each one driving the air from her lungs. She looked at her mother, her fragile, broken, beautiful mother, and she saw guilt written across that weathered face, as clearly as if it had been carved there. "Mama," she whispered. "What is he talking about?" Addie's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Her hands were shaking so badly that she had to press them against her thighs to still them, and tears were streaming down her face, cutting tracks through the dust and grime. "Tell them," Obiora said. He was enjoying this, Pamela realized with horror. He was actually enjoying watching his wife's world collapse around her. "Tell them what you did. Tell them why you really sent them away, not to protect them from me, but to protect them from the truth about their murderous mother." "It wasn't like that," Adaise choked out. "It wasn't. I didn't." "You poisoned your own mother," Obiora continued, his voice rising with theatrical outrage. "You killed her for her money, for her land, for her inheritance. And then you gave it all to me, because you were too much of a coward to keep what you'd stolen. I gave it to you because you forced me to." Adaise screamed. The words tore out of her like something that had been caged for too long. And suddenly she was standing straight. Suddenly there was fire in those dead eyes. Suddenly she was the woman her children remembered from their childhood. "I gave it to you because you held a knife to Pamela's throat and told me you would slit it if I didn't sign everything over. I gave it to you because you threatened to kill my children." Pamela felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She remembered that Dashik had been 9 years old, and her father had taken her to his study and locked the door. He had told her they were going to play a game. He had told her to be very quiet while Mama made an important decision. She had never understood what that meant. Until now. "You used me," Pamela said. Her voice was barely audible, but it cut through the room like a blade. "You used me as leverage against her." "I did what I had to do," Obiora said. "Your grandmother was a foolish old woman who wanted to leave everything to her daughter instead of to me, the man of the house. I simply corrected that mistake by forcing Mama to poison her own mother, by giving your mother a choice, her mother's life or her daughter's. She chose wisely." Chidi moved so fast that Pamela barely saw it happen. One moment, he was standing by the door. The next, he had his father pinned against the wall, his forearm pressed against the old man's throat. "Give me one reason," Chidi said through clenched teeth. "One reason why I shouldn't end you right now." Obiora laughed, even as his face turned red from lack of oxygen. "Because you're weak." Just like your mother. Just like your sister. You don't have the stomach for what needs to be done. Chidi Pamela's voice was calm, controlled, the voice of a woman who had learned to keep her emotions locked away in a courtroom. Let him go. He deserves to die. Yes. She walked forward and put her hand on her brother's arm. We do this the right way. He's confessed to extortion, to threats against a minor, to being an accessory to murder. We have witnesses. We have evidence. We can destroy him without becoming him. Slowly, reluctantly, Chidi released his grip. Obiora slumped against the wall, gasping for air, but his eyes were still bright with malice. You think you can use the law against me? He wheezed. I own the law in this village. The police chief is my cousin. The magistrate owes me money. He'll never touch me. We'll see about that, Pamela said. They gathered Adeus, who was still weeping, still shaking, still trapped in the memory of the choice she had been forced to make 20 years ago. They walked toward the door, toward freedom, toward a future that might finally be free of Obiora's shadow. They were almost outside when Amika stopped. Wait, he said, something's wrong. And that's when they smelled it. Smoke. The fire had started at the back of the house in the kitchen where Adaise had spent so many years cooking meals that were never good. Enough cleaning floors that were never clean, enough suffering in silence, while her husband enjoyed the fruits of her labor. But this was no accident. Someone had poured accelerant along the walls, creating a ring of fire that was rapidly closing in on the only exit. He planned this, Chidi realized. He knew we were coming. He planned this from the beginning. Obiora was standing by the window, watching the flames spread with a satisfied expression. Did you really think I would let you win? Did you really think I would let you take her away and destroy everything I've built? You're going to kill yourself too, Pamela shouted. There's no way out. There's always a way out for men like me. The question is whether there's a way out for people like you. He turned to face them, and the firelight danced in his eyes like something demonic. Here's what's going to happen. The house is going to burn down with all of you inside. I am going to escape through the passage I built years ago, a passage that none of you know about. And tomorrow, I'm going to stand in front of the village and weep for my family, tragically killed in an accident. And everyone will believe me, because everyone always believes me. You're insane, Yemeka breathed. I'm practical. Your mother should have learned that lesson a long time ago. The heat was becoming unbearable. Smoke was filling the room, making it hard to breathe, hard to think. Pamela's eyes were streaming, and she could barely see her brothers through the haze. The windows, she gasped. We can break their windows. Bard, Obiora said cheerfully. Had them installed last year, for security purposes. I told your mother, to keep burglars out, I said. She never suspected they were really to keep her in. Adaise had stopped crying. She was staring at her husband with an expression that Pamela had never seen before. Not despair, but something cold, something calculating, something that reminded Pamela, with a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature that her mother had once been capable of killing. The passage, Adaise said. Her voice was steady, eerily calm. It's behind the bookshelf in your study, isn't it? The one you never let me dust. Obiora's smile flickered. How did you... I've lived in this house for 35 years. Did you really think I didn't know every secret it holds? She stepped forward, and Obiora actually stepped back. I know about the passage. I know about the documents you've forged, the bribes you've paid, the people you've destroyed. I know everything. Then why didn't you? Because I was waiting. Another step forward, waiting for them to come back. Waiting for them to be ready. Waiting for the right moment. The fire was closing in now. The heat, a living thing that pressed against their skin like a predator testing its prey. This was not the broken woman they had found scrubbing the floor. This was someone else entirely. I've spent 20 years preparing for this night. Adaise continued. 20 years documenting every crime, every sin, every horror. The evidence is already with people. You can't reach lawyers in the city. Journalists, politicians who owe me favors you don't know about. If anything happens to me or my children, everything gets released. Your reputation, your freedom, your life, it all ends. You're bluffing. Am I? She smiled. And it was a terrible smile, the smile of a woman who had been underestimated for far too long. Let's find out. Kill us all, and see what happens tomorrow. Oh, show us the passage, and maybe I'll let you live long enough to run. For a long moment, the only sound was the crackling of the flames. Then Obiora moved toward his study. The passage was exactly where Adaise said it would be, behind a bookshelf that swung open to reveal a narrow tunnel leading down into darkness. The air that rushed out was cool and stale, untouched by the inferno consuming the house above. "Go?" Obiora snarled, gesturing toward the opening. "Get out of my sight." "Ladies first," Ade said, and there was ice in her voice. "Pamela, take your brothers and go. I'll be right behind you." "Mama? No. Go now." Pamela wanted to argue, but the ceiling was starting to groan, and Chidi was already pushing her toward the passage. She grabbed Amaka's hand, and together they plunged into the darkness, their feet finding stone steps that led down, down, down into the earth. Behind them, Edes lingered. "You thought you broke me," she said to her husband. Her voice carried down the tunnel, reaching her children's ears like a final message. "You thought you destroyed everything I was, but you forgot something important." "What?" Obiora's voice was thick with smoke and rage. "A woman who has nothing left to lose is the most dangerous thing in the world." Pamela heard something, then a sound she couldn't quite identify, followed by a grunt of pain. Then, footsteps, rapid and light, coming down the passage behind them. "Mama?" she called. "Keep moving." Ediz's voice echoed back. "Don't stop until you reach the end." The passage twisted and turned, leading them through rock and earth and darkness. Pamela's lungs burned, her legs ached, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. She could hear her mother's footsteps behind her, could hear the distant roar of the fire they had escaped, could hear something else, something that might have been screaming. Finally, mercifully, they emerged into the night air. They were in the forest behind the compound, the same forest where they had played as children, where they had hidden from their father's rages, where they had dreamed of escape. Ades stumbled out of the passage last. She was covered in soot, her clothes singed, her face streaked with sweat and tears. But she was alive, and in her hand, she held something that glinted in the moonlight. "Mama?" Chidi said slowly. "Where is he?" Ades looked at the knife. Then she looked at her children, her 3 beautiful children, who had survived against all odds, who had become everything she had dreamed they would become. "He's not coming," she said. "What did you—" "I made a choice." Her voice was flat, emotionless, the voice of someone who had moved beyond guilt and regret into some darker place. "Just like I made a choice 20 years ago. He gave me impossible choices, and I made them. That's what mothers do. We make the choices no one else can make." Behind them, the house collapsed in on itself, sending a shower of sparks into the night sky. The flames painted everything in shades of orange and red, and for a moment, it almost looked beautiful. "We need to go," Pamela said. Her voice was shaking. "We need to get you somewhere safe." "I am safe," Ades said. "For the first time in 35 years, I am safe." The village woke to the news that Obiora's house had burned to the ground with him inside it. The official story was that he had been drinking, that he had knocked over a lamp, that the fire had spread too quickly for him to escape. It was a tragedy, everyone agreed. Such a good man, such a pillar of the community. Such alos. Pamela watched the funeral from a distance, hidden among the mango trees that had witnessed so much of her childhood. She watched the village elders give speeches about her father's generosity, his wisdom, his kindness. She watched women who had gossiped about her mother for years wipe away crocodile tears. She watched the performance of grief that had nothing to do with genuine loss, and she felt nothing. She had expected to feel something relief, maybe, or guilt, or even a dark kind of satisfaction. But there was only emptiness. A hollow space where her father should have been that was already filling with something else. Ade did not attend the funeral. She was already gone, spirited away to the city by her children, installed in a small apartment with a view of the skyline and no memories to haunt her. She spent her first week of freedom sleeping like someone who had been awake for decades, like someone who was finally safe enough to close her eyes. When se woke, she told them everything. She told them about the years of abuse, the beatings that left scars no one could see, the psychological torture that had slowly stripped away everything she had once been. She told them about their grandmother, about the impossible choice between poison and watching her daughter die, about the guilt that had eaten at her every single day since. She told them about the night of the fire, about standing in that passage with a knife in her hand and her husband's back to her, about making one final choice. "I'm not sorry," she said. Her voice was calm, steady, certain. "I know I should be. I know a good woman would feel remorse. But I looked at him, and I thought about everything he had done, and I thought about everything he would continue to do if I let him live. And I made a decision. Mama, Emeka said gently. You don't have to explain. Yes, I do, because I need you to understand something. She looked at each of her children and turned Pamela, who had become a warrior. Chidi, who had become a builder. Emeka, who had become a storyteller. I did what I did so that you could be free. Not just free from him, but free from the cycle. Free from becoming him. I took that sin onto myself so that you would never have to. Pamela knelt beside her mother and took her hands, those hands that had suffered so much, that had been burned and broken and beaten, but had never stopped reaching for her children. There's no sin in protecting your family, she said. There's no sin in surviving. The law might disagree. The law will never know. There's no evidence. There are no witnesses. There's only a tragic accident and a family in mourning. Pamela smiled, and there was steel behind it. I know how to make sure it stays that way. 3 months after the fire, Emeka began to write. He wrote about a woman who had lived in a beautiful prison, who had sacrificed everything for her children, who had made impossible choices in impossible circumstances. He wrote about monsters who wore human faces, about the darkness that could exist behind closed doors, about the secrets that families buried so deep they became part of the foundation. He did not use real names. He did not use real places. But everyone who read the story knew, on some level, that it was true. The book was published a year later, to critical acclaim and commercial success. Reviewers praised its unflinching honesty, its raw emotional power, its willingness to explore the uncomfortable truths about family and survival. It was called a masterpiece of modern folklore and a haunting examination of domestic horror. Emeka dedicated it to his mother, but as the book gained attention, something unexpected happened. People began to come forward. Women who had been trapped in their own beautiful prisons read Emeka's story and saw themselves in it. They contacted him through his publisher, through social media, through letters that arrived by the dozens and then by the hundreds. They told him their own stories, stories of abuse, of impossible choices, of monsters who wore the faces of husbands and fathers and brothers, and they asked for help. Pamela was the one who answered. She used her legal expertise to create a network of support lawyers who would work for reduced fees, shelters that could provide safety, resources that could help women escape. Chidi contributed his business acumen, setting up foundations and fundraisers and systems that could sustain the work long term. What had begun as a personal tragedy became a mission. Anadise, who had spent so many years feeling powerless, became something she never expected to be: a symbol, a survivor, a voice for the voiceless. She gave interviews, carefully worded to protect her secrets, while revealing enough to inspire others. She spoke at conferences, at shelters, at schools. She looked into cameras and told women that survival was not a sin, that protecting your children was not a crime, that escape was always possible, even when it seemed hopeless. I spent 35 years in hell, she said in one interview that would be viewed millions of times, and I emerged from the fire. If I can do it, so can you. It was almost 2 years to the day after the fire when the stranger appeared. Pamela was working late at the foundation's office, a small space in the city that had become the hub of their operations. When she heard the door open, Say looked up expecting one of her colleagues, and found instead a young woman she had never seen before. The woman was in her early 20s, with dark skin and high cheekbones, and eyes that seemed familiar in a way Pamela couldn't quite place. She was well dressed, clearly educated, clearly nervous. "Can I help you?" Pamela asked. The woman hesitated. Tense aside, "My name is Chizam. I'm your sister." The world stopped. Pamela felt the words hit her like a physical force, felt everything she thought she knew shift and rearrange itself into a new and terrible pattern. A sister, another child, another secret. "That's not possible," she heard herself say. "It's true. My mother she was with your father. Years ago, before he married your mother, and then ... after." Chisam's voice was shaking, but she pressed on. "He paid for my education, visited when he could, told me I was his special secret. I didn't know about you until I read your brother's book. I didn't know about any of it." Pamela sat down heavily. Her mind was racing, trying to process this new information, trying to fit it into the narrative she had constructed. Her father had had another family, another daughter, another victim of his manipulations. "Why are you here?" Say asked it. "Because I need to know the truth." Chisholm stepped forward, and Pamela could see the desperation in her eyes. "The book, it talks about a monster, about a man who destroyed everyone around him. But the man I knew was kind to me. He was Hentel. He told me he loved me. I need to know if that was real or if it was just another lie." Pamela looked at this young woman, her sister, God. She had a sister and she saw herself at that age. Confused. Searching for truth. Desperate to understand a father who had always been a mystery. "Sit down," she said. "I'll tell you everything." And she did. She told Chisum about the abuse, the manipulation, the years of terror. She told her about their mother's impossible choices, about the fire, about the knife. She told her things she had never told anyone, because Chisum deserved to know the truth about the man who had fathered her. When she was done, Chisum was crying. "I thought he loved me," she whispered. "I thought I was special." "You were useful," Pamela said, and her voice was gentle, despite the harshness of the words. "He kept you as insurance. Probably another asset to be deployed when needed. That's what he did with everyone, turned them into tools for his own purposes. Then why didn't he use me? Why didn't he tell anyone about me? Because you were more valuable as a secret." Secrets were his currency. He collected them, traded them, used them as weapons. Thank you for listening to this part of my story. If you've been through something similar, or if this resonates with you, please know you're not alone. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories and updates from the Folktale Stories TV. We'll see you in the next one.